Welcome to Bookin' It. Today's episode will be Little Women. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bookin' It. Whether you be a little woman or a little man, nope, that's not the right tense. Whether you're a little woman or a little man, or a big woman or big man, welcome back to our podcast. I'm, of course, Cooper Cobbs, your eloquent host, and joining me today is my good friend, Mr. Tanner Lewis.
Howdy, folks.
And today, we thought that we would stop by in the midst of a sparse summer schedule to give you guys an episode on Little Woman, which may or may not be Tanner's favorite book.
Judge me all you want. I will prove my case here.
A common theme of this podcast has been that books that are supposed to be for women are actually sometimes pretty good, as in like Jane Austen and Little Women. So hey, I agree with Tanner's thesis. It's a very good book. Well, I guess we should say that Bryson's not here. He's on a trip. He's gone. And we couldn't make this work. So sad. But we are also happy because we got to spend a lot of time with him recently, didn't we, Tanner? On a cross-country road trip. So it really put our friendship to the test, one might say.
I'll admit, it might have been a little bit too much.
That's all you're going to say about that? Okay.
Yes, that is all I'm going to say about that.
Well, recently, Tanner, Bryson, and I, all three of us, just alone, took a road trip across the Midwest, Michigan, to Canada, to Kentucky, Tennessee, all the way back down to where we are in North Texas. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, we spent a lot of time together, so it was great. Anyway, today, and it's been about like over a month since our last episode, I guess this will probably be our celebration, Tanner, of 4 years. And what better book to be talking about than Little Women? So,
My
Tanner,
favorite
you've
book.
been, yeah, exactly. You've been pushing for this for a very long time. You keep saying it's your favorite book.
Have I?
I want to say, yeah, okay.
I didn't think that I'd ever pushed for it. I
think that you've wanted to read it on the podcast for a while, if I recall correctly. I think even like way back in the days when we read Lord of the Rings, Matthew's saying something about he's having to read all these books that he never want to read, and Little Woman was going to be one of them that we were going to make him read as well. So, anyway,
oh, that's right.
We're here now.
I lent him the copy that I'm holding right now, and he didn't give it back to me for 4 months. And when he gave it back to me, he said, "Yeah, I still haven't read it."
Yeah, exactly. Classic. Well, Tanner, give us your history with Little Woman, why you love it so much, and just your overall thoughts and impressions.
So, I first picked up Little Women at a time that I cannot remember. Mom started playing it for it as an audiobook because we were going to Big Bend. That's the memory that first comes to mind. We were in the van at Big Bend National Park down in very southern Texas. Yes, Big Bend, Texas. And we had been driving around the park, and Mom had started this audiobook for us called Little Women, and we had listened to it, and I will admit I did not like it at first. I really did not. But the sheer amount of time that we spent listening to this book as a family and finally finishing it, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 weeks later, I grew to love it. I can't tell you why back then I loved it so much, but now I can tell you why I love it now. It's just such a good, such a good story, and it's such a good reflection of a lot of things that oh wow, this has come back to bite me really fast, especially if Matthew was still on this podcast. I'm like, I relate to so many things in here. But like, actually though, I think that like the reflections that a lot of the characters in this book have, and the personal connection I feel to so many of the characters is just been really helpful. And I remember reading some of these and encountering actual advice that pointed me back to stuff that I had read in the Bible earlier. And it ended up helping me so much. And so,
yeah, if I could just jump on that real quick, like reading this book, we'll get to it later, but like this kind of idea of moralism, but like not really, like this is not, like you don't read this and think, oh, this is like straight out of Aesop's fables. Like these are just a bunch of stories about why you should be good little kids. Like it's an actual story with actual characters who are real, who do things with well-written, story. At the same time, though, like you say, you take things away, you take actual advice away, and so it's kind of like this weird, interesting case study of something that's really good and also trying to communicate lessons and morals to people. So I find that fascinating, and was definitely paying attention to that on this go around.
Yeah, I will have to admit the first part is my favorite. You just can't beat the first, like, part one, like book.
Right.
They're in parts, right?
I think so.
I regret to inform you, I haven't picked this up in a couple of months. Yeah, part one and part two. Part one's just my favorite out of the entire thing. I think that it's. Yeah. I mean, you've got Joe and Lori going on their, like, having their little fiascos the entire time.
Yep.
And you spend the entire first part wondering, will they actually get married? Lo and behold, they do exactly what you wanted them to do. It's so glorious. See, it's such a good book. Anyways, we'll get to that later.
Yeah. So I guess for me, my history with it has kind of been, just kind of growing up with it being ubiquitous. I guess, like, I have 2 younger sisters. I guess we should say, like, Jen and I both have younger sisters. So I guess both of us in varying degrees of amounts, but the girls outnumber the boys, right? So anyway, we live with girls. But all that to say, it's kind of grown up with it. I think that Louisa May Alcott is one of those authors, kind of like, I guess, Laura Ingalls Wilder, to where homeschooling parents just kind of, like, I don't know, claim her, and her stuff is around. We visited both Louisa May Alcott's house in Massachusetts and the various homesteads of Little House on the Prairie, so there's that for you. And I have very interesting stories I can tell you about one of those trips in particular. Anyway, so I saw her house, and it was actually a lot of fun, and it kind of helps me contextualize a lot of the scenes, especially like when they're doing plays and things like that. So that was a really fun experience. But it's kind of grown up with it. The movies, like one in particular from the 90s, I didn't really look it up, but I think it's kind of like the most well-known one. After
the Little Women one from the 90s.
Yeah, but there's so many movies, but I think it's from the 90s. I think it's the most well-known after the more recent one, which we can talk about too if we want. But anyhow, as of recent years, my younger sister Caroline has said that it's one of her favorite books as well, and she has a copy that I'm holding right now that I didn't read it. I listened to it. But I all that to say, I don't think I've ever listened to the full thing or read the full thing all the way through. Like, I have, I know all the beats, I know the scenes. I've read portions of the real thing. I've read portions of, adapted versions. I've read portions of Little Men, for heaven's sake. Like, I started that, like, when I was way too young, probably. So I'm very familiar with her story. But it's coming back and make it will. Have you read Little Men? I haven't read it yet.
I've read all of them.
Oh, really?
I've read all.
What's the third
multiple times?
Joe's Boys.
The third one is Joe's Boys. Yeah, it's when the characters from Little Men are all grown up. It makes me so happy.
So very recently, on our big, like, kind of our big summer trip that we took, we were at the beach and we were at Barnes & Noble, and my grandma was like, I'll buy you guys a book each. So I think I bought, like, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky or something like that. But Sarah Jane got, like, this nice Little Women edition that has Little Women, Joe's Boys, and Little Men all in it. So I guess we have that.
Yes, I remember.
I
think I picked that up.
Oh, really? Yeah.
The other day.
Yeah. No, it's a good copy, but she's kind of listening to it and reading it now. So we're kind of going through it all again. But anyway, I was really excited to kind of go through it all the way. And, like, the opening part, like you said, like, I kind of remembered it word for word, even though I didn't ever think I'd read it all the way through like that. And maybe because the movies use, like, word for word some of the dialogue and stuff like that. That's probably what it is. But anyway, I just loved it a lot. And we'll talk about why, but it's really great. It's really great. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that before we move on.
Well, I think kind of the first thing we have to talk about is something that we talked about whenever we were talking about The Hobbit both times, is that this book, each chapter reads like its own story, right? It's got its own character arc, and you've got a plot that's within the chapter, but they're all working towards something as a whole, right? It's so beautiful. So what I was about to say is I've actually gone through and read it. Like, I know that I've read through it 2 times, like, all the way through, but I don't do that anymore. I just go and I read my 4 favorite chapters and, things that I love. So I guess what I'm saying here is you can read this for a long time and not get bored, because it's not like you're reading, the same thing over or the same thread the entire time,
Yeah. and it's probably a good way to tell a story to children at first too. You know, like it's
Mm-hmm.
not a very complex structure. They don't have to follow all these various threads. It's just like little stories that all tie in eventually, which is awesome. It's also like, but it's better than like that TV show that you watch that'll just like have 20 episodes in a season and like 5 of them will be plot focused and the rest are just like, you know, various side quests as the kids will call them on the internet these days. But in Little Women and The Hobbit, it's different. It's like these are episodic things that are happening, but they're in looking towards a final ending, consummation, you know, that kind of thing. So it's got forward momentum. But that's a great point, for sure. I think that's definitely true.
Yeah, a major clarification that must be made before we dive into the meat of the story.
So we've talked about it a little bit, but you know, it's well written. What about it would you say is well written? Like the vocabulary, the prose. What aspect of it would you say kind of lends itself to being this height of children's literature and writing?
Man, I haven't read through all of it, and I do not remember all of the prose as well as I'm over here reading. I'm like, I don't know what I liked so much about it writing wise. I love the story. I don't know. But I think the thing that I like the most about it is just its simplicity. Like the simplicity of the writing. It's not outlandish. Something reminds me of some lines that Tolkien has. But it's also not dumbed down like some other books that I've read in the past. Things that come to mind from like teen books where it's just like, you know, everything is about the story and any amount of writing that covers up the story is not worth it.
Right. Or the opposite. The story is just disguised and obscured and adverbs and adjectives, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's neither of those. It's neither Tolkien-esque nor is it all the way down to the dumbest level of reading you can get. It's clear. It's concise, but it's beautiful because the story that she's writing through the dialogue, which is mainly where like 98% of the story comes from, is just so well done.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point. It's simple. It's direct. I think that one of the things that Little Woman does kind of in the vein of good literature is it doesn't like write down to children. Like it doesn't say, this is a kid's book, so it's going to be simpler. You know, it says this is a kid's book, but also I'm going to write this to the best of my ability and actually does that and kind of takes kids along with them. I mean, like the vocabulary, just the way that she phrases certain things, like it's really, really good. At the same time, but it's really just never too much for kids, but it also like draws them along. It doesn't dumb down the writing like you were saying. I think that one of the things I love about her prose as well is just her ability to communicate, I don't know, mood, I guess. In every single scene that you're in, you can kind of get the mood. You can get the way the characters are feeling. She's very good at describing, like even on the first page, you know, like this is the 4 young faces on which the firelight shone brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again, as Joe said sadly, "We haven't got father, and shall not have him again for a long time." And so it was like very good, just scene-setting stuff of this is the way the characters are feeling, and then just good dialogue and good way of phrasing things. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I think the last thing I'd like to say about just the writing in general is like kind of running along the lines of like being able to pick up the mood. I think that like everything reads as if you're hearing it or thinking it, right? There's not ever, I mean, because so much of it is dialogue compared to actual actions. It's just, it reads like you are participating and listening in on the conversations and the thoughts of everybody. So much better than I think a lot of other books can handle that, just because she is so direct, she is so concise. It runs like you would think something, right? It's not running as if, oh my gosh, as if they're trying to throw a bunch of fancy words in to be able to, you know, like some people do at a prayer or whatnot, to be able to try and impress somebody, right? They're not throwing all those extra words in there that are unnecessary, but instead she's thinking about it like anybody would think about it. It was delightful. That's all that needs to be said there, right?
True. Obviously, one of the best parts of the delightfulness is the characters, getting to enjoy them. What you said you were able to, you know, relate to several things that happen. What about the characters or the situations can relate to? Why are these characters so fun, so indelible, so fun to read about?
I think it's just it's the characters themselves. I think is what has finally kept me why this is my favorite book of all time, because the characters evolve so much in the story, and they evolve in such a relatable way, and it's obvious that they're struggling, and they're struggling in a way that's, I don't want to use the word relatable again, but I'm gonna do it. They're struggling in a way that's relatable and that you can like see and understand, because I mean, Song of Solomon,
Whoa.
words, not Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes.
Slip there.
you know, both are by Solomon. It doesn't matter.
Same, yeah.
Both the same. Ecclesiastes, nothing is new under the sun, and so
See, Tanner, you're right. And then Solomon wrote Ecclesiastes right after he broke up with the girl he wrote about in Song of Solomon. We all know that, yeah.
Let me get away with this one. Just let me continue.
I will. Go.
And nothing's new under the sun, and so the things that these girls were struggling with, and the things that Lori was struggling with, and the things that the Joe's little students struggle with in the book Little Men, they're all very relatable, because all of the moral issues that she's tackling and everything that they're coming from are coming from a biblical worldview, but it's not coming from the kind of biblical worldview where you've got verses quoted at you that they were reading. It's not
right.
It's not overbearing like other stories are. It's relatable. That's what it is.
So do you have a favorite of the four? Joe, Meg? I mean, I guess it's hard not to say Joe, but
Beth.
Oh, okay.
Brother.
Okay, here's the thing. I was going to ask about Beth. So
if I meet a Beth, I will know who I'm marrying. I kid you not. I've known this for years. I've matched up all
Here's
of
my question. Here's my question.
Go ahead.
Is Beth like too perfect? So we read about a character in Jane Eyre. I forget her name. What's her name? That she meets very early on in the novel, and who ends up dying.
You're asking the wrong guy. I remember the general gist of the story, and that is from Jane Eyre.
Oh, her name was Helen. That's what it was.
Okay.
And sometimes I've heard in Dickens you see the same thing of just this really idealized, innocent child character who can do no wrong. Is Beth like that for you? Like, is she just written to be the angel of the story, so perfect that it's hard to sympathize, hard to understand? You're shaking your head, so I guess you disagree. But
no, I disagree. I assume that you think that because you're mentioning it.
No, I'm generally wondering about it, because I think that sometimes I resent these characters, and I'm, I don't know, wondering about my own response to the character.
I was challenged by that whenever I was like, will I ever meet the true Beth? And so then I scoured the entire book to find some fault with her. And then I came across a great passage. I forget where it is in the book. I needed to highlight it or something, but you know how adverse I am to highlighting in a book. But Beth is talking to Joe, and all four of the sisters are talking, and they're all talking about like the things that they do wrong. And then Beth mentions the thing that she did wrong, but it was so minor, right? Like in our comparison. Right. Like we're over here like, "Oh my gosh, Beth, you're perfect then," right? But I think
it's like at that point, why even say your fault, because you're just going to make ours seem that much worse in comparison.
Exactly. But I think the thing that Marmee was talking to Joe after that, because Joe was a little bit upset. No, she wasn't upset at Beth. Somebody was upset at Beth because of that. So somebody was talking to Marmee. I remember Marmee saying at one point that everybody's faults look extremely big to them until they're mentioned in another group of people. Like everybody will like, what am I saying? I need to find the quote. I'm saying it wrong. Anyways, I do not think that Beth is perfect. I know that Beth messed up. And the ways that Beth messed up look different because she was struggling with different things than other people were struggling with. She was struggling with, being outgoing and, wanting to be neighborly.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I think that Beth is not perfect, but even more so than that, I think that her character works. And I think the reason that I think Beth works much better than Helen and Jane Eyre or some other like Dickensian character is that she is just real. Like we all know, like people can be. I'm not saying that nobody can be like kind or pure. Like obviously, some people are, like more inclined to do kind things. I guess, like people like are further along in their spiritual journey or are just.
Some people have seemed
like
perfect to me at some points in time.
Right.
No,
and at the same time, like maybe
much care to make sure that I disproved that in my mind. I scoured.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Are you saying you looked for faults? What?
Don't worry, I found them.
But I agree with you. I think that Beth, several times in the story, like the author, I think she goes out of her way to say, like, oh, by the way, Beth was like not perfect either. Here's why, because I think she anticipates that objection. You're right. Like, there's several times where she's like narrating their progress or their faults, and then conversations with Marmee could be a whole like I don't know, that could be a podcast even if it was like modern day. Conversations with Marmee. Yeah. You ask questions, you get motherly advice. Okay. Anyway, also because maybe I was kind of imputing to her something I've experienced in my own life, which is like once you kind of get the reputation as the goody two shoes or the pure one, then you kind of just get envisioned as this perfect character who can do no wrong, and so, but that internally like that's not true, and you struggle with wrestling like this. That's not true, but I want to preserve my reputation, but also I don't want to be prideful, but also I know I'm not that, and so like even though I deny it, I just look like I'm being humble, which even increases my reputation. So like there's all this baggage that I can like bring to the story and see that in Beth and know I understand where she's coming from. She feels real to me. She acts real in the story. She's not perfect. She denies it. The narrator tells us, circumstances tell us, Marmee tells us, even though people give her this reputation of being kind and nice, which she is, she also has faults too. But anyway, I not to focus on Beth because let's be real, everybody has their faults, and I really loved how, like I said, over the course of the story, we get to see all the characters grow and change, right? Like Meg, just really relatable to me. Just becomes this character of, okay. Actually, before I say this,
you would relate to Meg.
No, hang on. Here's what I'm gonna say. So Meg is this character who struggles with basically envy of other people being better off than she is, and has to learn the lesson of, you know what, my husband, my kids, my family, what I have, what God has given me, that's enough, which is a really good lesson to learn, and it's a character that learns it effectively. At the same time, it's relatable to all of us. I mean, all of us at some point have experienced envy of someone who's better off than we are. And desire to have that thing. I mean, let's be real. Like, we're 21st century America, so let's not pretend that there are that many people. Because let's be real, we are the top like 0.0001% in all of history in terms of wealth and prosperity. And like I'm sitting in an air conditioning room with access to water and plumbing and food anytime I want it. And I'm leaving tomorrow to fly to Hawaii on a mission trip. By the way, like there are these things, right, that are. Yeah. They can seem so I don't know. Anyway, all I'm saying is even despite all that, I think we can still take lessons away and say even in our own context, we still feel these desires of that person has more than I do. And how much more so in this modern day and age do we have to be reminded of, look what all you have. Like Meg, what she had was enough for her, but you have even more than she has. That should be enough for you. You know. So
Ecclesiastes, nothing is new under the sun. Yes, nailed it. Didn't say Song of Solomon.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. Well, hey, Song of Solomon also says that many waters cannot drown out love. So, all these characters have a lot of, they grow up. They're girls, and they get married and they fall in love. So, we talked about it earlier. Should we just talk about it now? Like, should Joe and Lori have ended up together? Tanner, are you team Lori? Are you team?
No.
Okay. Looks at me sharply. Yes. Okay, so you said earlier.
The story is perfect.
I want to say you said earlier, you said you are happy that they did not end up together because that's not what you wanted to happen or something like that. Explain yourself.
I did not. Okay. At the beginning, I did not know that is what I did not want to happen. I wanted that to happen at the beginning.
That's fair. That's a good assessment.
But I did not know what I wanted. I did not truly know what I wanted.
Yeah.
She explained to me I did not want that. Louisa May Alcott very plainly explained to me that I did not want that. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it led me to relate to Amy a lot more than Joe. just a little bit like Amy's character, ironically enough, I don't know, spoiled brat seems a little bit like me.
Yeah, let's be real. Yeah, no.
Anyways, like I don't think that, I don't know, something that, here we're gonna go into confession time here. I am a lovesick dog, and it does not matter there's somebody if that's directed at somebody or not. It's just I'm in a constant state of that. Cooper, you can attest to this, correct?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Bryson,
I mean, I would have phrased it less delicately or more delicately. Excuse me. If we're talking about your self-esteem here, Tanner, if I'm going to be your therapist in confession time, but
self-esteem. What's self-esteem?
A valid question.
Anyways, I think one of the reasons that I like this book so much is because, like, all of the love triangles and whatnot, it's not fake. Obviously it's fictitious, but
right.
my not fake still stands. They're very real. It's a very real aspect of like how things go down in the real world. You think that somebody is meant for you, and half of the readers think that as well for the good part of an entire book.
Right.
But then obviously the Lord shows you that is not what he had for you. And then it's given to somebody else, and what does that mean for you? Right? Are you jealous of them? How do you feel? How do you deal with heartbreak? Do you end up like Lori, or are you stubborn like Joe? Things like that. Like, I think if you're hearing one message, listeners, throughout this entire podcast, it is go read the book and realize that there are a lot of things that you need to go read in the Bible afterwards.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead and finish, and then I do want to jump to this conversation about like moralism / communicating, themes and virtues and things like that. So
yeah,
we'll get there.
So the entire second part of the book is kind of aimed toward, if the first part of the book is aimed towards moralism, then the second part of the book is aimed at that as well, but it's also more intertwined into all of the love stuff because that's what most of them are going through at that point.
Right.
So as we're going through that, you see 4 people in 4 different stages. You've got Meg, who is happily married already. You have Joe and Lori, who both just, for lack of a better word, broke up, but they were never in a relationship in the first place.
Right.
So you can't say broke up. But they expressed that they didn't have feelings for each other, broke Lori's heart. So you've got one person that's heartbroken, one person that is trying not to be heartbroken, like that's recovering from breaking somebody's heart. And then you have Amy, who is searching for love, and Beth, who we don't have to talk about Beth. We still have 4 different people in 4 different aspects. We'll count Lori in for Beth. But I think that's been recently one of my favorite parts of the story because, I've been struggling with my own love life, kind of, and just being able to deal that correctly. And I think that these people are good examples of how that is handled correctly in a biblical way for the most part. And there's also examples of how not to handle it in the book. An example pops out of how Lori handled the heartbreak originally, and then how what Amy was marrying for and why she wanted to marry Fred originally. Just all the stuff like that. It's all really good.
Well, Amy is hard to sympathize with in the fact that she's like, man, I realize that I'm marrying for money. Now I can marry for love and money with Teddy. Let's go.
Much more money.
Right, seriously. Yeah. Yeah, anyway. But yeah, I get your point. Yeah.
Anyways, I love the lovey-dovey stuff in the story.
But yeah, it is good. Like, in terms of just, especially stuff that, I would want my daughters reading eventually, or that I would want my sisters reading, like, nothing's better in terms of just teaching them how to I don't know, grow up in a, like, it really is like an embodiment of biblical principles, like you said. Like, there's so many things that'll take you to the Bible, but also this book is just putting on flesh. Like, what does it mean to be a good wife? What does it mean to be a good husband? What does it mean to love your neighbor? You know, what does it mean to do all these things that are really just like put in the flesh as in the best way that a story can.
Yeah, and I think I don't know, for the people out there that are going to be like, there's plenty of examples in the Bible. Well, first of all, nothing's better than finding a biblical. Nothing's better than finding a biblical example outside of the Bible, right? Like a good biblical foundation, founding a story like this one is, which is good entertainment outside of actual Bible study. But then second, a lot of the Bible stories, like, they're not very long, and some of the best examples that you get are bad examples of what not to do, versus actual prescriptive examples. I'm regretting saying that.
Like, okay, so here's what I'm saying. Like, the Bible is, sufficient. It, the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. I think what you're trying to get at is this idea of taking these, like, further, presenting them in scenarios which we can, like, eminently relate to. You know, like,
that are closer to
our
Western heart.
Right. Well, the Bible says, love your neighbor. It says, wives, submit to your husbands. It says these things. And we go, okay, that's great. What does it look like? And the Bible gives examples, but it's powerful to see those elucidated and put into flesh and given life, and is seen so much more powerfully as well, and other stories as well. Like, what stories do that? They take real people, real characters, and say, this is what a good character would do. This is how you ought to live. This is how, this is teaching you. It is teaching you something. And we'll talk about that. Like, a story's purpose isn't just to moralize, isn't just to teach lessons, but how much greater can a story be when not only is it an amazing story that is satisfying, but it also embodies something greater. And so, like, the Bible and the stories of the saints and are awesome and wonderful, and they can clearly embody biblical principles, especially fiction can as well, in a way that just aids us even further. So anyway, let's move to that discussion, because I was really fascinated by, Louisa May Alcott is kind of claimed as this proto-feminist, because all, major female authors before modern feminism get claimed for modern feminism, and also that, she is kind of in this, like, transcendental movement, right, with, like, her dad and, Thoreau and those people. Anyway, like, had I not known any of that context, I really would have just thought, like, man, this is just, like, straight conservative biblical stuff, you know what I mean? Like, if this is supposed to be the cutting edge of progressivism, or liberal Christianity, then wow, like, how far are we now? Is what I'm trying to say. Because I thought it was really good stuff. Just like that moment where, like, Meg is, like, complaining about her husband, right, to her mom, about John to her mom, and then she goes, "You're just kind of wrong, and you need to, like, go be a housewife." And she's like, "Oh, I guess I do." Which is, like, just really just shocking in terms of, like, trying to be claimed as a feminist, because boy, oh boy, would a feminist, her blood broil at that passage or something like that. But
exactly.
Anyway, I just really thought that a lot of the advice and the lessons that were learned were really, really good. And I'm wondering, my question to you, Tanner, is how is it possible to communicate in such a way in a story to where the lesson is communicated, to where virtue is taught, but at the same time not be preachy, not be moralistic, not be, pure Aesop's fable outside of Aesop's fable, and not just be, trying to stuff things into a story when it doesn't really, go there, belong. What say you?
Well, there is... Let me find it. There is one example that comes to mind of one chapter that always comes to mind whenever we're talking about, like, the moral lessons and the whatnot, and all of that. Because there's one thing that... Is it that one? Here. I apologize. I need to find this. No, that was when Beth had fever. That's not it. What chapter was it where... Whatever chapter it was that... I want to read a part of this. Where Joe lets... where Amy falls into the ice.
Oh. That's pretty early on, isn't it?
It is very early on.
It's one of the classic scenes.
Yes, but it's after... No, it's 82. That's what it is. Let's find it. Yep, found it. It's Joe meets Apollyon, chapter 8. Anyways, Amy has just burned Joe's book, her precious book that she was going to give to
Right.
Father, and Marmee had sat down with Joe in the chapter before at Amy's Valley of Humiliation, and she had said something that was it's said in the Bible, in a passage that Cooper will definitely cite for you after I say it, which is, "Don't let the sun go down on your anger," wherever that is from.
Yeah, that's gosh.
It's just
Paul's
so
letter
drilled in.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's somewhere in the epistles, and I can't come up with it at the moment. Anyways, Marmee says that to Joe in the chapter 7 before that, and Joe doesn't listen to her, and she doesn't listen to the advice of both Marmee and of Paul, and proceeds to go to bed and let her anger at Amy fester. And so then we walk into the next chapter, chapter 8, and Joe wants to go ice skating with Lori. And Amy is consulting Marmee about how to make up with Beth, or make up with Joe. And so Marmee tells Amy and says, "You should go and catch up with him and apologize while you're out on the ice." So she does that, but Joe is still angry at Amy while she's on the ice, and lets Amy go ahead and lets Amy go and fall. Wait, is that all in the same chapter? That's all in the same chapter. I'm just insane. Anyways, so Beth, no, I keep on saying Beth. It's Joe. Anyways, Joe lets Amy fall into the ice, and then they call Lori, Beth, Amy. Jeez, if I say Beth one more time, I'm gonna lose it. Amy is now
Okay, wait.
like
When you say Joe lets her fall, like that's not what happened. Like,
it's not really what happened. Joe didn't warn her, despite knowing better.
well, I guess. Well, okay, I guess was she really aware that she was coming, or did?
Yes,
Yeah,
she
true.
was.
I guess she did know. She knew.
She saw
and was
her
just kind of,
putting on
like,
her skates
ignoring
on
her,
the ice,
and then all of a sudden,
but ignored her and didn't say anything and didn't warn her about the ice, despite Lori warning her. But Lori didn't know that Amy was coming behind, so he didn't warn her. Anyways, so the blame did run to Joe in that instance, because she was still angry at Amy. And because she was still angry at Amy, it led to her falling in the ice. Anyways, this story of this entire story of Beth, or Amy, Amy falling into the water, and Joe's anger getting in the way. It's something that I always think about whenever I get angry now, and whenever I go to bed after getting angry at one of my parents or at Tucker. That one happens often. But I think the reason that this story, that these stories are so good at being moral but still being a good story, is that the moral of the story is said while still being about Joe and Lori and Joe's character arc in the rest of the story. Like, it's
Right.
talking about how Joe is working through her anger issues in this first section, in part 1 of the book, right? It's talking through how Joe is working through that and how she's looking for help with that, and all of the aspects of what advice she's getting, what lessons she's learning. And so you're learning that and you're participating in the story with her, but all of that learning is happening through the story and through what you're reading with her. So
that's a good point.
I
Like,
think
the lesson doesn't come at cost of the story; it comes in context of it.
Yeah. So aside from being like an Aesop's fable, which is all about just, one short thing trying to bring you a powerful message, right? This is a long story that had a short part about a message about what happens whenever you let the sun go down on your anger. And so it's just, I don't know. I think that's why the story, or like the lessons that I've learned from reading these books, are so powerful, is just because the lessons that they're teaching you is the story itself. It's you're living the lives of these people as you're reading it. And so because the lessons that you're learning are founded in biblical foundations and aren't secular, kind of like Aesop's fables might be considered as well. Like, they're pure and they're entertaining, and I don't know. I could rant for days about that.
Yeah, and maybe I should do more research, because I think that Louisa May Alcott did have like a philosophy of this, of like, you kind of see it in like the epitaph right in the very beginning, where she like quotes John Bunyan, who wrote The Pilgrim's Progress, right? Of this, she has this purpose she's writing this book for. It's going to go out and do things. You know, it's kind of trying to communicate virtue in some sense. I have a passage that I wanted to read because I thought that it was great, and it really just you've been talking this whole time about how this is a story with real characters and real situations. I mean, real as in like, you know, they feel
fictitious.
Real.
Yeah, they feel real.
Yeah. But at the same time,
I was about to say, and like, these are the most real fake characters I've ever read about.
Exactly. No, seriously. But like Tanner said, in the context of those situations and conflicts and characters that feel real, they work through issues that happen to communicate virtue in the way the author intended. And it's really just, like, I'm kind of describing it. I couldn't do it myself, probably. You know, not yet, at least. Like, it's a masterpiece. But there's this one passage that I really, really loved. And as I was listening to it, I was just like, man, this perfectly describes to me what apologetics is supposed to be about. Okay. And I did not know this scene was in there. Like, Jo and, what's her eventual husband's name again? The professor. Bear.
Professor Bear.
Oh, yeah. It was a great line. Because it was like, she says, the way you pronounce it is, you don't say beer, and you don't say bear, you say something in between, but only the Dutch can get it right. And I was like, that's actually a really good description of it. Anyway, they're at this party, and she overhears, like, these, young bucks talking about philosophy. This is what it says. Okay. Before the evening was half over, Jo felt so completely disillusioned that she sat down in a corner to recover herself. Mr. Bear soon joined her, looking rather out of his element, and presently several of the philosophers, each mounted on his hobby, came ambling up to hold intellectual tournament in the recess. I mean, come on, that's like perfect language right there. Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
The conversation was miles beyond Jo's comprehension, but she enjoyed it, though Kant and Hegel were unknown gods, the subjective and objective unintelligible terms, and the only thing evolved from her inner consciousness was a bad headache after it was all over. It dawned upon her gradually that the world was being picked to pieces and put together on new, and according to the talkers, on infinitely better principles than before. That religion was in a fair way to be reasoned into nothingness. Intellect was to be the only god. Jo knew nothing about philosophy or metaphysics of any sort, but a curious excitement, half pleasurable, half painful, came over her as she listened with a sense of being turned adrift into time and to space, like a young balloon out of on a holiday. She looked around to see how the professor liked it, and found him looking at her with the grimmest expression she had ever seen him wear. He shook his head and beckoned her to come away, but she was fascinated just then by the freedom of speculative philosophy, and kept her seat, trying to find out what the wise gentleman intended to rely upon after they had annihilated all of the old beliefs. Now Mr. Bear was a diffident man, and slow to offer his own opinions, not because they were unsettled, but too sincere and earnest to be lightly spoken. As he glanced from Jo to several other young people, attracted by the brilliancy of the philosophic pyrotechnics, he knit his brows and longed to speak, fearing that some inflammable young soul would be led astray by the rockets, to find, when the display was over, that they had only an empty stick or a scorched hand. He bore it as long as he could, but when he was appealed to for an opinion, he blazed up with honest indignation and defended religion with all the eloquence of truth, an eloquence which made his broken English musical and his plain face beautiful. He had a hard fight, for the wise men argued well, but he didn't know when he was beaten, and stood to his colors like a man. Somehow, as he talked, the world got right again to Jo. The old beliefs that had lasted so long seemed better than the new. God was not a blind forest, and immortality was not a pretty fable, but a blessed fact. She felt as if she had solid ground under her feet again, and Mr. Bear had paused, out-talked, but not out one-whit convinced. Jo wanted to clap her hands and thank him. Anyway, I've had that experience many times in my life where I'm like, oh man, that atheist made a really good point, or man, maybe that skeptic proved the Bible isn't really reliable, and I like walk away, and it's like walking away from the fire, like when you're really close to it. and suddenly like your face gets hit with that cold again. You know what I'm talking about? And the same thing too, like when you hear, you're reassured, the Spirit by means of either apologist or preacher or just, reading the word, you're just reassured. And to me, that was a beautiful scene of just what that can be like. And just in terms of this person standing up for what he believes in, he, can't speak these people, but he can sure, stand up like a man. And so I really like that scene, and I thought that it was a beautiful embodiment of what our job should be in terms of ministering to the world, in terms of defending the faith. So I liked it a lot.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like our debate resolution for the
it does.
Year.
Like he's basically describing rationalism and being like, rationalism is crap.
Not even that. I mean, you could say the same about empiricism.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just naturalism, but yeah.
But yeah,
and the enlightenment,
more nihil. It sounded more like nihilism.
Or yeah, it's not even nihilism, because nihilism comes later. But this is like post enlightenment in terms of
that's right.
The enlightenment happens, and these people are like, we can get all the good things that Christianity gave us, just like without Christianity, and it's like, no, you can't. And that's kind of when nihilist really people come in and are like, let's be real, guys, you can't do that. But anyway,
yeah. Anyways, I'd forgotten about that bit. When was that?
Yeah.
When was that? When did that happen?
This was near the end. Like
were they at?
It's in part two. They're at some party. Joe and her and Mr. Bear. This is before Beth dies. Anyway.
Yeah, this was before she went back home, wasn't it? Like, she was still in New York.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, there's one other part that I wanted to read that I thought was really beautiful, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So Beth is just basically communicating to Joe that she's about to die, and Joe is like, no, I won't let you.
Sorry, I know exactly what you're going to read.
This is the paragraph that's right after that. Simple, sincere people seldom speak much of their piety. It shows itself in acts rather than in words, and has more influence than homilies or presentations. Beth could not reason upon or explain the faith that gave her courage and patience to give up life and cheerfully wait for death. Like a confiding child, she asked no questions, but left everything to God and nature, Father and Mother of us all, feeling sure that they, and only they, could teach and strengthen heart and spirit for this life and the life to come. She did not rebuke Joe with saintly speeches, only loved her better for her passionate affection, and clung more closely to the dear human love, from which our Father never means us to be weaned, but through which he draws us closer to himself. Anyway, that was beautiful. So, just like in the same context, like you're crying because you love Beth, you love Joe, and their characters are coming through Joe's stubbornness, Beth's humility, kindness, and submissiveness, and just the wrestling in between, but also this lesson of, like there's God's sovereignty and there's us, and we need to follow God and His will, and to do what He asks of us, and to sometimes that means being comforted by Him as you are experiencing discomfort or even death. So I love it a lot. Anyway.
Yeah. One that
at this point we're just saying like this was good. This is good. We've already kind of done the expositing. So, I don't know if you have anything else to share in that vein.
Well, in the expositing factor, there's one last quote that I have to read, and this is the one that makes me cry every single time I read it. So we're gonna see if I can get through this without shedding a tear. It's in chapter whatever that is. What's that? 40, chapter 40, and this is the one where Beth dies. Spoilers for everybody that's
Yeah, that's this far in. Didn't realize that we were spoiling the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. But it's the saddest thing that has ever happened in the story, and one of the few things that has ever made me openly cry multiple times. Like Where the Red Fern Grows, cried the first time, haven't cried again.
Right.
There's a lot of books where like I've cried the first time and haven't cried again. This one, I think I've cried every time I've gotten to it.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's at the very final end of the chapter where Beth dies, and it says, "When the morning came, for the first time in many months the fire was out. Joe's place was empty, and the room was very still. But a bird staying blithely on a budding bough close by. The snowdrops blossomed freshly at the window, and the spring sunshine streamed in like a benediction over the placid face upon the pillow. A face so full of painless peace that those who loved it best smiled through their tears and thanked God that Beth was well at last."
Yeah.
Like, how do you convey that so beautifully after
like
killing
a benediction that fell upon a placid face? Like, that's so beautiful. No kid will know what that means unless you're like, a prodigy. but it makes sense and it's beautiful.
But no, it's the reason that they understand what it was, right, is because it's so painstakingly obvious when she explains it out on the next, a face so full of painless peace.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
if I can get on my soapbox here for a minute, I think that the obviously she's a very good author, but I think that only Christians are able to communicate the honesty of death and the beauty of, 1 Corinthians 15, the body going to be with the Lord, or the soul, excuse me, and the body to be raised again on the last day. But just the idea of, the most common objection to God is the problem of evil, the problem of suffering. But if we're being real, it's not just like the existence of suffering that needs to be explained. It's the peace that we have in the midst of it. It's the beauty and the brokenness. It's this, we can't just say there's all this suffering, God doesn't exist. It's, well, I see suffering and it doesn't make sense to me, but I also see this beauty that can't be explained by mere nature. I see this peace that I have sometimes that I can't explain. And so to me, that depiction is just a wonderful expression of grief, sadness, sorrow, and joy in the midst of all of it. That is real, that's true, but that can only be really captured and understood through the Christian worldview. So that's my soapbox, but I love it.
I think, I'm going to step up there now that you're off.
Here, I'll help you up. Yeah.
I think the one thorough line that I've seen every time, and it's gotten clearer and clearer the more and more I've read this book, it is the theme of joy through every other fleeting feeling. Yeah. Like, I think that whether it's spoken or not, every character in this book felt true joy walking through every single thing that they walked through, because they knew that they weren't carrying their packs up the mountain alone.
Yeah. Or a metaphor from Tolkien, yeah.
Exactly, and also to work with the Pilgrim's Progress theme of the first part.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But, like, seriously, I think that, like, they all bore everything with joy. Joe learned how to bear things, like, hold steadfast and bear it all with joy. And that is the thing that's the one thorough line that runs through every single short story in here, whether it's spoken or not, is that joy isn't a fleeting feeling of happiness that you get or a moment of elation. It's
and also for Joe, it's joy coming through submission too.
Yeah.
Like this like you try to fight for what makes you happy, and then submitting to what you think will not make you happy is where you find joy and peace, which is the paradox of the Christian life, to be honest.
Yeah, and so I think that's what makes this book so beautiful to me every time I read it, is because I struggle with that. I think that everybody, I mean, who hasn't struggled with the idea of being joyful and everything? But I think that's what makes me, what appeals to, like, the one quality that I see in Beth that makes her so amazing, is that she was joyful throughout everything that she was doing, throughout all of the pain that she was carrying, throughout all the sorrow that she was doing, and she was joyful. And as a result, all of the pain that she felt, both when she was sick and when she was struggling with things, made it seem as if the things that she was struggling with were nothing. And that, the reason why she was never controlled by her feelings the way that the other girls were, is because she truly understood what joy was.
Anyways, all right,
Little
we're off our soapbox.
Joy.
Yes. Well, that about wraps it up, I guess. Anything else you want to say? Any final thoughts, concluding thoughts? We kind of made our appeal about why this book is great and why you should read it throughout the whole podcast. There's so much more we could talk about, but we could talk about the movie. Maybe we need to do like an episode on that, but
I will. My final plea is that if you listened to this, then I pray that you have read the first book, because otherwise I'd just ruined your life like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We'll put a disclaimer at the beginning.
Yeah, well, I mean, at this point, it's a given. Like
exactly. But the last thing is, go and read the other two. At least the next one, especially if you're a guy. Like, if you're a guy, I would beg you to not stop here and go read Little Men. Cooper, I'm pleading with you right now at this moment.
Maybe I
Go
will.
read Little
Maybe
Men.
I should.
You should. It is all of the things that you learned over here is then applied to boys and guys over here in the next book in Little Men. And then all of the love stuff is explained better in Joe's Boys for guys. It's
Nice.
like, I don't know. It's like if you had a story and then you targeted it only towards girls. Go read it too. I think that everybody should read all three of them, especially if you've read the first one.
All right. Well,
Anyways.
I guess for me, it's great. It's beautiful, well written. Just every conversation with Marmee, that's awesome. Every little narrator tidbit that gives us insight into the characters and insight into our own lives. It's all great and beautiful, and you should read it. Read it aloud. Read it. I don't know. I should quote Deuteronomy. Read it when you're like, walking, and when you're sitting down. No, I won't do that. That's blasphemy. But all to say, we love this book. We love you guys. Thank you for listening. Let's do some donor shout-outs. Tanner, what do we do? What do we do donor shout-outs? Like, what's with that?
Why do we do them? It's because we love the people that give us money, especially since many of them were Isaiah's family that just left.
Yeah, exactly.
But this podcast is listener supported, meaning that since we started this podcast, we have not put any more money into it, either for mics or the software that we use to be able to host all of the episodes. We try our best not to spend our meager allowances on pour them all the way into this hobby. So you guys, since y'all love it so much, I'm sure, especially if you've made it through this entire hour-long podcast, I'm sure that you love us so much, are the people that keep booking it afloat. Y'all are the reason that we continue to do this after so many years, because we could not afford to do that. So if you want to keep us afloat, keep the ship alive, you can go to patreon.com/bookinit and give us however much you can, however much you're willing. We are grateful for any amount of money that you desire to give us. It comes with a lot of fun benefits, though, such as posts, a couple of videos, some bonus episodes that we do. But if you donate to any of our $5 up tiers, this is where you get the donor shout-out.
That's right. Today we'd like to say thank you to Nana.
Nana.
Ben, Pappy, and Wayla.
Yeah.
Anna. Keenan. William. Okay, that was weird. Jenny, my mom.
Miss Jenny, we love you.
Mrs. Hall,
thank you.
And Kara.
Thank you, Kara.
Yeah, we love all those people, and join Patreon. It's a very fun place.
Significantly shorter.
It did. Isaiah, a good friend Isaiah recently, moving on to bigger and better things, besides us, obviously. He sadly had to leave the podcast, but his grandparents and family members were always very generous to us, but we thank them for their support. We thank you all for listening, and for those who support, we thank you as well. We'll be back soon with something else. In the meantime, you know what to do.
Keep on booking it.